I think that some people feel a level of insecurity about really leaning into Trump's cognition because the president who just left office had a lot of real questions about his cognition. But no more. No more with that. Because we can both acknowledge, as literally everyone did. Do you remember when Biden got dropped off the ticket? Why'd that happen? I love how they go, no one wanted to talk about it until he literally got kicked off of his own nomination. All right, whatever. So people clearly saw. We beat Medicare. That's not normal. That's not normal. Of course. And you could both acknowledge that if he had stayed in the race, I would have preferred a cognitively diminished Biden to a cognitively diminished Trump. You can acknowledge that the people around him and his overall decision-making led to outcomes that mostly were pretty solid in a lot of ways. And not misunderstand what happened, which everyone does. Okay. But who's the president right now? What if the way that we correct course on that is by focusing on the president now too? Because something is going seriously wrong. I'll give you some examples. But this was sort of inspired by a piece from The Hill titled "Trump's Mental Decline is Undeniable." So what now? Confabulation. It's a word you're going to be hearing a lot in the coming months. President Trump has always been willing to mislead people. Whoa. What's happening with my computer? When it was to his advantage. Even his supporters recognize this. Hence the famous admonition to take Trump seriously, not literally. Whatever the hell that means. But what Trump is doing now is something different. Confabulation is sometimes called honest lying because the person doing it genuinely believes that what he's saying, even if it is obviously and patently false. And I messed up the reading of that sentence. Period. False. Period. Okay. I'm cognitively great. I just told you about that in the other segment. A person confabulates when they are telling completely invented stories that don't provide them any particular tangible benefit. In other words, it's not like lying to try to get out of a speeding ticket because you're saying things in vivid detail that aren't true, but clearly in the moment you think that they're true. Honest lying, as they said, or confabulation. Confabulation isn't misremembering a date or forgetting something. The mistakes of memory we are all subject to become confabulation when people remember false information in vivid detail. Details so vivid and complete that people who don't know otherwise often believe what they're hearing is true. In older people, confabulation is one of the clearest early signs of dementia. And I'll show you the examples that they cite once we get to them. I promise. The day you witness someone confabulate is often the day you are forced to admit to yourself that a beloved parent needs help and that all the little slips and oddities you've been seeing can no longer be rationalized away. So if you're a more conservative viewer and you're thinking, really, what about Biden? What about him? Why is that the only thing you ever say? Hypothetical person that I'm talking to, but that's not in the room with me. We get it. I'm with you. Yes. And I'm impressed that even in whatever cognitive state, a lot of really good governance happened. But maybe that was people around him. Whatever. And everyone came to that conclusion, and then he literally had to end his political career because of it. Now, Trump is the president. But if you're thinking, well, Biden did the weird story about his uncle being eaten by someone, didn't he? Isn't there something like that? Yeah, maybe that was an example of confabulation. For Trump, the day we could no longer pretend everything is fine came on July 15th, when he told a lengthy story about his uncle, John Trump, who he claimed taught at MIT and held 3 degrees in nuclear, chemical, and math. I love it. His uncle, chemical. My uncle was a great professor in chemical. His uncle, according to Trump, once told him how he taught Ted Kaczynski the Unabomber and how very smart Kaczynski was. Let me play that clip for you. And then we'll remind ourselves why it's confabulation. I almost made the stupidest joke of my life. And I'm not going to make it, but it had to do with, I'm sorry. I don't want you to think that I'm trying to like lead you on. I want to be honest. It's just too bad of a joke to make, but it's so silly. You would laugh so hard, but you don't get it. I'm sorry. Did I just forget the joke that I was going to make? No, it's funny. It's so funny if you could hear it, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm confabulous. That was it.
We appreciate you doing an amazing job. They're building plants already. And they're building plants, and they have already their permits. And I have to brag just for a second, because when I first heard about AI, it's not my thing. Although my uncle was at MIT, one of the great professors, 51 years, whatever. He was the longest serving professor in the history of MIT, 3 degrees in nuclear, chemical, and math. That's a smart man. Kaczynski was one of his students. Do you know who Kaczynski was? There's very little difference between a madman and a genius. But Kaczynski, I said, what kind of a student was he, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump? He said, what kind of a student? And then he said, seriously good. He said he'd go around correcting everybody, but it didn't work out too well for him. Didn't work out too well, but it's interesting in life. But I will say this, that we have the
It's so interesting in life. I love how that's how he ends it. It's just interesting in life, how things stuff happens. If you appreciate the show and want to support me and my family business, drinkpep.com, search it up, order directly to your doorstep in a couple of days. A nice, refreshing, energizing beverage that actually uplifts your gut microbiome, treats it well, no artificial flavors, none of that junk. And that's real, unlike the story that Trump just told. Also click the subscribe button. Thank you. So the article continues. Trump's uncle was indeed a professor at MIT. Check. But everything else in this story is pure confabulation. Trump's uncle didn't have degrees in nuclear, chemical, and math. He had degrees in electrical engineering and physics. And Kaczynski did not go to MIT at all. He went to Harvard. But most telling of all, it is categorically impossible for Trump's uncle to have told him any such story. Kaczynski became publicly known as the Unabomber when he was arrested in 1996. Trump's uncle, the MIT professor, died in 1985. In other words, Trump's uncle could not have told him the story because there was literally no story to tell during his lifetime. So how does that come to your brain? Because you want to go, oh, he's just a liar. But why though? There was no gain, there was no advantage to be sought by telling that lie, and it looks like he believes that happened. Once you've seen that Donald Trump is confabulating, the article continues, it cannot be unseen, and all sorts of other mildly disturbing incidents suddenly fall into place. And this is not going to be one of those compilations where I show you all of his glitches and his gaffes and his things. A lot of those can be chalked up to just zany or whatever. I'm so sick of that. He's just zany. Really? Do you just do your I'm zany? What is zany? I don't know, but I am it. And I've never told a fake story like that. I've told fake stories, but not one like that. I've never told fake stories. Come on. Difficulty with mathematical concepts is another early warning sign of dementia. Now watch Trump attempting to explain how he's going to make drug prices go down by 1,000, 600, 500, 1,500%. Let me show you that clip. Here's Trump saying what the article noted.
And I think we're going to be very successful fairly soon. We'll have drug prices coming down by 500, 600, 800, even 1,200%.
So it just sounds, I watched that and I'm trying to meet the moment. Because before, I feel like a lot of my content would be subdued by the fact that I just accepted a lot of these dumb Trump assumptions. I would just go, nah, that's Trump. I don't know, that's Trump. Why? Why would we do that? That's ridiculous. If a normal human adult says something that's mathematically impossible, obviously, as Tucker would say, then we should be concerned by that. Whatever the, justification is or the reason. That's complete nonsense, they say, unless drug companies will be paying patients to accept prescriptions, since reducing drug prices by 100% would mean they were free. Certainly someone who got a business degree from Wharton and has spent his life running a company would know how percentages work. You can't reduce drug prices by more than 100%, and he's going not just 110%, like fun, yay, but 500, 600, 1,200, 1,300. Which would be drug companies paying us for drugs. Fun. Depends on the drug, but could be fun. That could be our solution to our national division. Just get us all on psychedelics all the time. Or take his instance in his insistence that former President Obama and his FBI director James Comey made up the Epstein files. Let's show ourselves that clip. Why don't we?
You know, these files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden information. You know, we went through years of that.
Very true.
With the Russia.
And the Biden, is not the part that they're talking about. Even though they were long out, those people, of office by the time Epstein was most recently arrested in 2019. Obama was long out of office. Again, that's very troubling because being unable to correctly process when past events took place is a common feature in confabulation. The same goes for being unable to remember that he himself appointed Jerome Powell. I don't need to show that. We've shown it like 100 times. But he said, why did Biden appoint Jerome Powell? Why the hell was he appointed? And Trump appointed him. And then, of course, there are the little lapses in judgment that Trump has been displaying recently. And it goes through to say, listen, this author's not a fan of Trump, but at some point we need to be able to have an honest adult conversation about what's going on here. If you're not comfortable with labeling this as dementia, that's fine. And I won't do that because I don't know. I'm not a doc. But despite my doc telling me I had the best cognition ever, giraffe. But there's no question that the president, the man tasked with making critical life... This is so funny about picturing Trump's with his test, thinking it's a cognitive test. I mean, it is, but it's like a dementia screening test. And seeing a giraffe going, giraffe, which is a part of the test. Okay. The man tasked with making critical life and death decisions for both the country and the world is struggling with mathematical concepts, has vivid memories that are not rooted in reality, and has increasingly foggy grasp of past events that didn't happen. That's not a medical diagnosis. These are facts we can see for ourselves, and we all know, even those of us who voted for Trump 3 times, that this can't be allowed to continue. Whatever dementia issues Joe Biden may have, there's no denying that his staff was superb at managing them and protecting both Biden and the country. Trump, however, does not have those guardrails. This is a good point, too. Biden's struggles, part of the reason that maybe they weren't acted upon, do not allow people to go, no one let anyone talk about Biden's age and cognition until, no. Everyone was talking about it constantly. Not necessarily people who are advocating for him, because obviously you kind of are going to be a little bit more inclined during an election to be like, here's the good things he's doing, and he's old, but whatever. But constantly there were media discussions about his age and people's concerns around his cognition. But one of the reasons it maybe wasn't 5-alarm fire earlier was because his staff was really good at handling the situation. Trump doesn't have those guardrails, and that should scare us. Think about the people he's surrounded himself with. You think they're going to be good guardrails? I don't think so. And it concludes, Donald Trump is showing all the signs of suffering from dementia. Again, I can't diagnose that. I don't know. But if this were a neighbor, a parent, or a family friend, you would have no trouble seeing it. We should not turn our heads just because it is president. It is the president is the last sentence. Not it is president. Trump. And I think that's just brilliantly said. And you have a problem with it? Blame the Hill author. I just read their article. I appreciate all of you so much. If you're a podcast listener, please do leave a rating and review, and have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.